Tonight, you might pour yourself a drink. Maybe wine with dinner. Maybe a beer after work. Maybe something stronger if the week earned it. You won't think much about it. It's just what people do. But here's what almost nobody asks: why? Not why you personally drink. Why humans drink at all. Why, out of every species on this planet, we are the ones who learn to ferment things, preserve the results, and then build entire civilizations around the ritual of consuming them. The answer isn't what you think. And it goes back much further than you've been told, because the story of alcohol doesn't begin with a party. It begins with survival. For most of human history, finding something safe to drink was one of the hardest problems your ancestors faced every single day. Water, the thing we now take completely for granted, was a death sentence in many forms. Rivers carried bacteria. Standing pools bred parasites. Wells became contaminated. And for a species without modern medicine, a bad drink didn't mean a stomachache. It meant death. It meant watching your children die. It meant entire camps wiped out from a single contaminated source. So your ancestors had a problem. They needed water to survive. But water was trying to kill them. And then something strange happened. Somewhere between 10,000 and 7,000 years ago, humans in the ancient Near East began to notice something about certain stored grains and fruits. When they sat in water long enough, they changed. The liquid around them became something else. Something that didn't make people sick. Something that, in fact, seemed to make people feel unexpectedly good. This wasn't an accident of pleasure. This was a discovery of safety. Patrick McGovern, a biomolecular archaeologist at the University of Pennsylvania and one of the world's leading researchers on ancient alcohol, has spent decades analyzing residues found in ancient pottery. What he found rewrote the standard story. The earliest confirmed evidence of fermented beverages dates to around 7000 BC in China, a mixture of rice, honey, and fruit identified in ceramic jars at a site called Jiahu. But McGovern believes the practice is almost certainly older, likely predating agriculture itself. Humans weren't farming because they wanted bread. There's a compelling argument, one McGovern has made extensively, that early agriculture, the entire foundation of civilization, was driven at least in part by the desire to produce reliable quantities of fermented drink. We didn't stumble into civilization despite alcohol. We may have walked straight toward it because of alcohol. But that still leaves the deeper question. The one that your ancestors couldn't have articulated but felt in their bodies every time they drank from a fermented source instead of a river. Why does alcohol actually protect against pathogens? The answer is ethanol. The same compound that makes you feel warm after 2 glasses of wine is a remarkably effective antimicrobial agent. Ethanol disrupts bacterial cell membranes and denatures the proteins that pathogens need to survive. Even relatively low concentrations, the 3 to 5% found in early fermented beverages, are enough to kill or dramatically reduce many of the bacteria and parasites that made ancient water lethal. Your ancestors didn't understand chemistry. But their bodies understood consequences. Drinking from fermented sources meant not getting sick, and not getting sick meant surviving long enough to pass that behavior on. This is where it gets genuinely strange. Because your body didn't develop a preference for alcohol randomly. In 2014, a research team led by Matthew Kerrigan at Santa Fe College published a landmark study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They were studying a specific enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase 4, or ADH4, the enzyme responsible for metabolizing ethanol in the digestive system. What they found was that approximately 10 million years ago, a genetic mutation occurred in our primate ancestors that made this enzyme dramatically more efficient, 40 times more efficient at processing ethanol than the version carried by earlier primates. 10 million years ago, long before your species existed. The leading hypothesis is that this mutation was an adaptation for eating fermented fruit on the forest floor. As climate change in East Africa forced our ancestors from the trees to the ground, they began consuming fruit that had fallen and begun to ferment. The primates who could metabolize that ethanol without getting violently ill could access a calorie source others couldn't. They survived at higher rates. They passed the mutation on. And eventually, that mutation became part of you. Your relationship with alcohol was written into your genome before your species had a name. But knowing that your body can process alcohol is different from knowing why humans chose to make it, celebrate it, and build the earliest known monuments to it. And this is where the story takes a turn that no one fully expected. In southeastern Turkey, there is a site called Göbekli Tepe. It is the oldest known temple complex on Earth, built approximately 11,500 years ago, roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids. It was built by hunter-gatherers, people with no permanent settlements, no cities, no agriculture as we understand it. And yet they moved stones weighing up to 20 tons and carved them with extraordinary precision. For years, archaeologists couldn't explain why. What motivates a nomadic people to build something permanent? Then researchers found the troughs. Excavations at Göbekli Tepe uncovered large stone vessels, troughs capable of holding hundreds of liters of liquid. Analysis of residue inside them, conducted by researchers including Oliver Dietrich of the German Archaeological Institute, found evidence of fermented grain. Not bread. Not stored food. Fermented grain. The people who built the world's first temple weren't just worshipping something. They were brewing something, and the brewing may have come first. The working hypothesis now held by a significant number of archaeologists is that the need to produce alcohol in large quantities for ritual gatherings may have been one of the catalysts for the transition to agriculture. People needed grain not just for food but for fermentation. And to have reliable grain, you needed to plant it, tend it, and stay near it. Alcohol may have anchored us to the earth. It may have given us reason to stop wandering. And once we stopped wandering, everything changed. Cities, writing, law, trade, the structures that define what we call civilization emerged from that anchoring. And somewhere near the beginning of that chain, there are stone troughs full of fermenting grain and people gathering to drink from them under open skies. There is one more layer to this. Across virtually every ancient culture, alcohol wasn't recreational. It was ritual. In ancient Egypt, beer was a dietary staple and an offering to the gods. Ninkasi, the Sumerian goddess of brewing, had hymns written in her honor that doubled as brewing instructions. In ancient Greece, the symposium, the foundational social structure of intellectual life, was organized entirely around controlled communal drinking. In South America, chicha, a fermented maize beer, was central to Incan religious ceremony. In ancient China, ritual bronze vessels were specifically designed for fermented offerings to ancestors. Every major ancient civilization independently arrived at the same conclusion: fermented drink was sacred. Not because they were superstitious, but because fermented drink was the thing that had kept them alive when water couldn't, had bound communities together, had fueled the labor of monument building, and had created the conditions for culture to take root. They were honoring the thing that had saved them. And they had no idea that's what they were doing. Anthropologist David Dietrich, in his work on the social role of alcohol in early human communities, argues that communal drinking solved the problem that goes beyond hydration. It created trust. Sharing a fermented drink with strangers is a biological gamble. You're consuming something that alters your cognition alongside people who could harm you. That shared vulnerability, Dietrich argues, is precisely what made it socially powerful. It was a trust signal, a commitment device, a way of saying, I am choosing to be less guarded in front of you. In a world where alliances meant survival and strangers were threats, a drink that lowered your defenses was a drink that built civilization one cup at a time. So tonight, when you pour yourself something and sit down at the end of the day, you are doing something your ancestors did at Göbekli Tepe 11,500 years ago. You are doing something written into your genome 10 million years ago. You are participating in a ritual that outlasted every empire, every religion, every language that has ever existed on this planet. You just thought you were unwinding.